Hi, listeners. Just a quick note. Today's episode was recorded before the inauguration on January 20th, 2025. So if it seems as though Lisa and I are not addressing whatever current horrors are occurring, please be advised. While we recorded this episode, we were at least a little bit blissfully unaware. Enjoy. Hello, you are listening to What If Nothing Is Wrong With You. I feel like the name of our podcast gets more and more poignant every day as the world collapses, by the way. I am Paula D. Atkinson.
I am Lisa K.
Okay, this episode, we are talking about overfunctioning today, which is overfunctioning is one of those things, I don't know if you've had this experience, Lisa, but when I have a client who usually is a female identifying client, and all I have to say is like, oh, it sounds like you might be an overfunctioner. And they just like, what? Like, it's the first time they'd ever heard it. It's one of those moments where I'm like, I feel like such a brilliant therapist when I say that, because most women have never heard the term.
Because most women are just taught that's being a good girl.
Exactly. Most women are taught this is how you exist in the world, is that you just overfunction and take too much responsibility for everybody's internal experience.
That's how you get people to like you. How else are you going to get people to like you, Paula?
Exactly. So first we have some chit chat. I wanted to, this came out a while ago, but I didn't have a chance to express to our listeners that the new Lady Gaga song is really good. Not the one with Bruno Mars, Die With a Smile, which is not a bad song. It's just, whatever. Sure, that's a great song. But Disease, yes. Weird art pop, fame monster, mother monster Gaga is back. And the video is amazing. It's so good. It's like a 80s horror movie, theater kid, freak out. It's so good. And it's so Gaga and it's so great. And I love it.
And it caused a fight.
The live version's so good. Her voice. So amazing.
Caused a fight, though, between you and my son. You and my son had your first fight.
We did have our first fight.
I will say, he was like jamming out in the back of the car. Like I was watching him and he was rocking out. And then what did he say it was? A 6 out of 10 or an 8?
Yeah,
8 out of 10?
Like a 6 out of 10.
And I was like, you were really rocking it. And what he goes, it just wasn't, how did he say? He goes, it just didn't feel like Gaga to me. And I was like, you don't even know.
I'm like, you've been on this planet for 8 years.
You don't even know who Lady Gaga is. You have no reference. And he was so sure about it.
I know. Your son and his like entitled opinions about pop stars. Listen, child, now I'm going to have to sit you down and teach you a thing or two about who Lady Gaga is. Unless you were alive in 2009 when Just Dance came out. I don't want to hear it.
Well, and he retracted very quickly because he was like, I don't want Paula to be mad at me. I think she's mad at me.
I mean, I appreciate that. It's really good. The video is so good and it feels like such old Gaga. It makes me so happy because LG7 is her next album and it's supposed to come out in February. And then she's headlining Coachella, and guess who got tickets to Coachella already?
Wow.
This bitch is going to Coachella for the first time. I was literally saying to my friend Kyle, who lives here in the desert with me, he was like, are you going to go? And I'm like, no, I've never been. And Beyonce already did it. She's not going to do it again. The only way I'd go was if Gaga headlines. And then like 2 days later, the announcement came out and I was like, well, there goes all my money. Fuck it. Whatever.
I didn't know normal people could go to Coachella. I thought you had to be famous and rich. I didn't know this
only
was a thing.
Yeah, you can't. Normal people can go if they want to not go on vacation for 10 years because it's not cheap.
Okay. So I was correct in that. Until we get invited as probably co-hosts or something.
Yeah.
Probably before long that will happen.
Famous podcasters. I'm sure I have a feeling there's a lot of famous podcasters at Coachella, actually. And I don't think they want to sit with us.
No. They'll be analyzing me. It's like, I'm not working. Stop.
No, we're too old. So anyway, I'm going to, Coachella is the end of April. And then LG7 comes out in February. So I'm just grateful that as the collapse of society is impending and the world falls in around us, at least Lady Gaga has an album coming out.
You got to do the fun things on the way out.
Yes.
While they're, I mean, I just think that's all that we have.
Yes. Yeah. You wanted to give us an update on Shrinking, which is a show that we talked about on our TV Therapists episode.
And just in case everyone is getting all of their pop culture reviews and ideas from us, in case.
Just the three of us? Yeah.
I feel a responsibility to say that after my glowing review of episode 2, after episode 3, I'm done. Shrinking and to get me to break up with a show that combines Harrison Ford and therapy, I feel like you have to work. So the grounds on which I'm breaking up with Shrinking are I could not tolerate anymore the constant the subtext of the white people, particularly 2 white men, arguing over the fate of the black character.
Yeah.
I was like, first of all, therapy is not I just was like, I can't.
We don't have any
It became
control.
so loud and it's gross. And there's also like white people managing the black woman's dating life. I just was like, I don't like this. And that's before we get to the fake face. You and I talked about the fake face.
Oh, that woman's face.
That no one's talking about the fact that it's such a fake, weird face. I was like, I can't look at this face. It gets weirder every episode. I don't know what's happening.
Well, small caveat. As a person who now lives in Southern California, you do get kind of used to it. So maybe they just live in LA and they're just used to seeing faces that look like that. Now that I live here, I am more used to it than I was when I lived in DC. It's wild.
It's so
wild.
disorienting.
It is disorienting. It looks like a Picasso painting.
Oh my God.
It's intense. Not hers, like all of them look like Picasso paintings. You're like, I don't think your nose goes there.
Yeah, and I'm just like, in every episode it's changing and I think it's that no one's talking about that it's changing. And I'm like, I need the reality to reinforce that her face literally shifts every time she leaves a room. It's just weird to me.
It is. It is. And I think when you live in Los Angeles, when you live around here, I think you get used to it. I had a client who lived in Boca for a while, and she said that she got really used to it when she lived in Boca. But now that she hasn't lived in Boca for a while, she's like, I don't. It's weird now.
It's jarring.
It's amazing what your brain does. Or your brain can get
it
used
just gets used to it. I'm like, I'm on the East Coast. I can't watch this show. And then there was a moment where I think I can no longer tolerate, like, first of all, therapists being portrayed as extraordinarily rich. Like,
right?
I'm just like, there was a point where someone was lecturing a baby therapist on, like, if you don't study, you're not going to get this, what is probably a $5 million house. And I'm just like, show me out of grad school. Like, she's a professor. I'm like,
Right?
Explain to me how you teach at a university and you have probably a half-time caseload.
Right.
Like, I can't.
They're never in session.
They're never working. I mean,
No.
do you see 3 people a day? Like, and you have a $5 million house? It's the cognitive dissonance.
Yeah.
And the white like rich people as these benevolent actors without anyone discussing the fact that, I don't know. I'm like, I can only now watch white rich people on TV be bad. I think that is my
Welcome to Real Housewives. Yes.
Yeah.
So this is why I like Real Housewives, is because at least the white people are atrocious and they're not pretending to not be atrocious, and there's something very relaxing and calming about that. At least everything is precisely the way they only give a shit about themselves. They only give a shit about what they look like, and they only give a shit about money. And I don't know, that's calming to me.
It's because it's like
not
the
gaslighting.
movie, the show, which was very good, about the rich billionaire family guy, and they were all not Severance, but the one where the dad was dying. Like, I was like, I can watch this. This feels psychologically accurate and relevant to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Evil white rich people like who have horrible personalities and are like mean and not in any way
have zero empathy.
Yeah, White Lotus clearly is aware of like
it's
the moral
painful
kind of, and it's like, let's just acknowledge
how horrendous
the
they
disconnect. Shrinking, I was like, I think the part of me that used to be able to watch Friends is just broken.
You can't anymore. You can't. Yeah. I keep thinking about that scene from White Lotus, the season 2, when they're in Italy, and it's the super white people talking to Aubrey Plaza, this character, and she's like, I don't know, just the state of the world. And the two rich white are like, what's wrong with the world? And I'm just like, that is so
I'm like,
accurate.
I
It's
can
so
watch
real.
that.
Yeah,
'Cause
that I
I've
can watch.
been her, and you're just like, what? Like,
Uh-huh.
what? It's like, that is relatable. And then I think there's some point where she even says, like, you're a horrible person.
Yeah.
Like, towards the end, I was like, this is TV. I can watch this.
And I like that the rich white lady, the gorgeous blonde, was like, yep, yes, I am. This is how I survive. And like, even that is deep. I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway,
We
I
broke
didn't
up
want to
with shrinking.
mislead anyone into loving. I mean, do what you want. You have free will. But I
really
don't
do
want to
what
be
I want.
responsible.
Yeah. I didn't even start the second season because I was like, I think I'm done here. I think I'm all
Yeah.
done. Yeah. I don't need
Three
more of this.
episodes in, I was like, I'm out.
Yeah. One thing that Lisa and I were talking about and we wanted to reflect on, because when we're recording this, it is the week after Thanksgiving. And what we notice and I love is that there is so, and this will be our segue into talking about overfunctioning and specifically female identifying people overfunctioning, is that the millennials and the Gen Xers and definitely the Gen Zers, we are not doing the completely bleed out and give all our energy to Thanksgiving and then do it a month later for the Christmassy holidays. I love that everybody's doing Friendsgiving. Nobody's doing this whole thing. It's so great. Talk about being honest with ourselves about what works and what doesn't work and how horrible white people are. It's great.
And asking ourselves back to what is my. I feel like people. I was on the TikTok kind of watching, and people have seemed to be asked like, what is my experience of this? And even the ones that were doing Thanksgiving, like,
Yeah.
people were telling their families like, no, like the whole like be quiet and let racist uncle whoever. They're just not doing it. They're like,
God.
I'm not listening to this. I'm not tolerating it. A lot of people didn't go. Parents weren't speaking to their kids. I was like, so much authenticity is happening. And I don't know if I feel like the election unleashed it, but it also feels like this building. I think the narcissistic industrial complex is just caving as people realize like capitalism is exploitative. Patriarchy it's now at the family level. Yeah. It's like, I don't want to play this game. I don't want to spend this money to go to this place where I don't enjoy it.
Be right.
And I'm celebrating. I think there's a conscious, I don't know, I'd be curious. I feel like there's also a conscious sense of this holiday is celebrating something gross.
So gross.
And we all were lied to and conned. And now it's like, it's yucky. Ugh. I mean, I don't judge anybody who's still doing it, but I do think it feels to me like there is a cultural awareness of just like, I don't, kind of like Columbus Day. Like, I don't want to, I don't buy it.
It's so nice. I think only good can come of us all being honest with ourselves. I mean, the fan fiction that we were all fucking taught about what Thanksgiving is and what all of this is, it's so gross. And like, great, let's not do it. And if you still want to have, like, my partner and I went over to our friend's house. There is a gay couple in this town that made 20 pies from scratch. And I was like, I will celebrate this. I will celebrate
kind of
homosexuals and pies.
How do you even make 20 pies? What kind?
Berry, pumpkin, lemon meringue, pecan, chocolate mousse of some sort. It was incredible. And I was like,
how many people came to eat the 20 pies?
There were 18 people. There were more than one pie per person. I was
Did
like,
each person
this is
bring
what I
a
celebrate.
pie, or did
No,
they
no.
make?
This couple made 20 pies. One couple made 20 pies. And
That
18
is a couple
people
to
came
stay friends with. That is, when we say go out and meet your neighbors, this
Shout out
is
to
what
Glenn
we
and
are
Sean.
talking about.
Glenn and Sean, friends forever.
Shout out.
See you next year.
Every
See,
year.
and
I
every
will,
year,
I will
and
bring
every
the
gathering.
silverware.
My God.
My
This is
birthday is this day.
Exactly. Yeah. Whatever. Yeah. And I appreciate that. And I appreciate being with people that I can actually talk to. I appreciate being with people that I can talk to that I enjoy eating with. Nobody made any disgusting, terrible, diety, bullshitty talk. It was great. It was awesome.
And I think it's a good, I feel hopeful. I feel not hopeful about a great many things. But
Sure.
I feel hopeful when I see this sort of trend towards like, I don't want to just go, because I do think so much of it is baked into what we're going to talk about with how women get trapped. And this is and there's just so many people that are like, no, I don't really require approval for participating in this. It's a horrible experience. Thank you so much. And I noticed I think it's hard to tell with the TikTok what's true and what's not, but it seemed like there was a lot less Black Fridaying, or at least some pushback against. And that made me feel a little
the overconsumption.
hopeful.
Yes.
That people are like, we know this is a scam too, and we're not going to be lemmings. Great. What else can we do with our time other than beat each other up at the Costco? What?
For a television?
Why?
Who needs an 8-foot wide television? Yeah, I think there is. And I think, only good can come of it. I learned from our Canadian friends that Canada also has Thanksgiving, but they have rebranded it as just the celebration of the harvest. They are no longer participating in any sort of, again, Canadian fan fiction about the white people and the native indigenous people being besties. They're not doing that anymore. And they're just like, this is a celebration of the harvest. Great.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Great.
So let's talk about overfunctioning. And let's talk about how it erodes not only our relationship with ourselves, first and foremost, but then always erodes your relationships with others. So we're just going to give you some definitions here. Overfunctioning is basically when we do too many things that are not essential all the time, even if our internal dialogue or the programming we've received from the culture is that this thing that I'm doing is necessary. So overfunctioners take on the responsibilities, emotions, well-being, and the needs of those around us, whether others want us to or not. And this is the helping is the sunny side of control that Anne Lamott talks about, often as a way of managing our own anxiety and our own insecurities. So people socialized female in our culture, specifically white females, are brainwashed to believe that we are responsible for the internal experience of everyone around us. And therefore, to make ourselves feel better, to calm ourselves, we overfunction as a way to be in this sort of vibration of auditioning for other people's approval and making sure and validating ourselves and making sure everybody feels okay around us. And it's a scam. And it will literally kill you. It'll kill you.
That's what Dr. Gabor Mate says.
And it'll make it so that you can't really connect with people. Because if you are connecting with people from a place of, I will make you like me by overfunctioning and by completely exhausting myself, that's not love. And we'll talk more about that.
And my definition, which I put together after I've been studying this in couples now for quite a while.
Yeah.
And the definition I have come to is overfunctioning is systematically lying to ourselves and others about our genuine capacity, limits, or interests.
Yes.
And I think that I feel like the lying it's a strong word, but it is an act of self-deception in many cases of people saying to themselves, I'm tired, I don't have this in me, I don't want to do this, and performing it. Just performing it anyway. And when you do that, you are lying to the people around you about who you are. And then we end up with that yucky feeling of like, well, I'm liked. I mean, people, but like they don't know me. It's very damaging internally.
It's all performative.
It's all performance. And I'd never thought, I can't remember if you said it or if one of my patients looked at it as, and I was like, it is. It's just performing like competence and energy that you don't have. And when I wrote that line in our little document, the image that popped into my mind was Saved by the Bell. Sure. And remember? Yeah. What was her name when she got on speed?
Wasn't her name Lisa? No.
Was it Lisa? I wanted to say Laura. Maybe Namika, do you know?
It'll come to us. And
the tall blonde.
Yeah. With the hair.
Got on speed because she needed to get A's and she had to be the cheerleader and whatever. And that image came to my mind of that episode. Mm-hmm. And that was all about just her need to be a perfectionist overfunctioner. And she almost killed herself. And then we had the, don't say drugs, whatever. But like,
right.
That's kind of in some ways what, and we're going to talk about how women get like programmed and groomed.
Yes.
But that's what we're doing, and we're
Yes.
making ourselves sick. And
Yes.
making our relationships full of resentment and hurt and just yuck. It's
And
yuck.
disconnection. You can't be connected to somebody. I was just talking to someone who spent Thanksgiving with her mother and was like, it's just so sad because I don't even know who she is. Because she just split. First of all, she hasn't eaten since the 70s. She doesn't eat food. That's another part of the overfunctioning. And we'll talk about that on another episode. The intersection of anorexia and overfunctioning. They are twin sisters. And she's talking about her mom like just goes around the table and is like doing this whole performative dance and like over complimenting everybody and making sure everybody's fed and making sure. And you're like, I don't know where you are, lady. Like, where are
It's
you?
like, sit down.
I can't connect with you because I don't know where you end and where you begin because you're nothing but a task functioning thing. You're not a person.
Yeah, and I think in many ways that's the point. It becomes, it serves, I think, like I had a group of women today talking about how they realize they're in that place. They're younger, but they're like, I don't know how to sit down. I don't know how to not be of service. I don't know how to just rest.
Yeah.
And it functions, I think, like an addiction.
Oh,
like
it
an
is.
eating disorder.
Totally.
It's a way to just be dissociated. And so
Dissociated.
instead of dealing with the discomfort of like the guilt that you may have to sit with, or like you might have to, because really it comes down to worth and do I feel entitled to just be on the planet? And obviously women are not entitled to just be on the planet.
Obviously.
You just do the stuff as this way of not having any feelings, this like numbing out, and it exhausts people.
Yep.
And they're not there. And then other people feel, you think you're serving them, but everybody around you feels sad and like anxious.
And disconnected. Yeah. Oh my God. And anxious. Jesse Spangor, Jesse Spainer, Jesse what?
Jesse Spano, I think.
Jesse Spano.
Jesse Spano.
Yeah.
We got there.
right.
We got there. Okay, so this is one of the reasons why we want to talk about this is because it happens with partners and within families so much. So for the overfunctioner, this looks like worrying about your partner's responsibilities, reminding them to take their medicine, call their family, go to appointments, making sure your partner goes to bed, wakes up, eats, doesn't eat, having goals or aspirations for your partner that they don't have for themselves, finishing their sentences, right? And what I find all the time, and again, one of the times where I feel like I'm a really brilliant therapist, which I don't think I am, but I think I'm just stating the obvious, is when I say, oh, overfunctioners always fall in love with underfunctioners, and underfunctioners always fall in love with overfunctioners. And the more you overfunction, the more they underfunction. And the more they underfunction, the more you overfunction. Isn't that fun? And then everyone hates each other and is seething with resentment. So when one spouse or partner is an overfunctioner, the other one is inevitably the underfunctioner, meaning they take less and less responsibility for themselves, their actions, their emotions. They won't step up. I mean, it is just fascinating to see it, and I know you do too, Lisa, like over and over and over, that a lot of times it's not always, because it happens in all the genders of partnerships and all the kinds of relationships, and it happens in mothers and fathers, it happens all over the place. And when the female identifying person is the overfunctioner, it's like she takes up more and more space, right? And puts her fingers in more and more pies and keeps doing. And then the other person, who sometimes is the male identifying person, gets smaller and smaller and more full of self-loathing and more shameful and more. And it is so gross. And I think it happens in DC a lot because everyone's a goddamn
Oh my
overfunctioner
God.
in that town.
It is. Well, there's the overfunctioner, and then there's the guys like on the couch smoking weed.
Playing
Who
video
hate
games.
themselves,
Right.
and live in this self-loathing,
Yeah.
depression-y soup, and
Yeah.
it becomes this like self-fulfilling prophecy, and it's very painful to watch.
Terrible. And it's terrible to live in. It's awful. So, Lisa, you started this list and I love it. Tell us how we get groomed to overfunction by the culture.
So ways that I have noticed are, if you go back, well, you don't even have to go back. You can probably do it today. But I think if you do go back to like sitcoms that we were watching in the 80s and
gross.
90s,
Take my wife,
And-
please.
the number, well, and what's the one that I was watching, the new one that actually subverts this. It's a new one in the black and white and the color. Did you watch it?
WandaVision?
No. Oh, dang it. Nameka, do you know what I'm talking about? This
Black and white
new
and color.
show. It's Kevin Can Go Fuck Himself.
Oh, Kevin Go Fuck Himself. Yeah.
Which it has the trope of the like naggy woman and blah blah blah.
With
And they're
Alexis,
always, did you notice they're always these super what was that show with the super attractive woman?
King of Queens.
Oh my god,
Or-
I could not watch that. It drove
Everyone
me
loves
insane.
Raymond. She's
And these
so
guys
hot.
are just like doing nothing, and they're complaining, and they're and like
Useless.
we were taught that is literally your hope
That's
for the
your-
future. Like that
That
was
is success,
grooming.
baby. Yeah.
So of course you get a woman who's like, well, I don't know, he's just like sitting on the couch smoking weed, but seems like I've been told it's my job to fix that about him
Right.
and get him to like act. And so the cycle, because we don't,
Yep.
we were not taught. I think the Gen Zers have figured this out.
Thank
God
God.
bless them. But we were not taught, like, you are dating the person. Do not date or marry based on potential.
No.
And we were taught it's all potential, which is just a future faking lie
Gross.
from the how else would you get anyone to marry these men? So
Right?
it's like this systematic break of, oh, isn't that? And I even see it today, and I've been talking to a colleague about this, these cartoons and TikToks and Instagrams where women are like, isn't this funny? I left a glass on the counter for 4 months to see what would happen. And like, isn't it hilarious how he let it sitting, and they'd write notes and like do all these funny things. And I'm like, this isn't funny.
No.
Like the fact that this guy is like watching you do all of the work, but we are taught that in order to talk about it, we have to make it palatable. And isn't this cute that he's just leaving this here? And it's like, it's not, I really am getting kind of militant about,
Great.
we shouldn't be laughing at this. It's not funny.
No.
And it's killing marriages, and it's killing the individuals in the marriages, including the men.
Of course.
The men are not okay. They're
Anybody-
not great.
Anybody who's over-identified with how much they do or how little they do are suffering. Both of those people are suffering. This is not good for anybody. I mean, and I'm so glad the Gen Z aren't doing it. They also don't think gender exists. So great.
Yeah.
So
And
much
all the
better.
women are coaching each other, like, don't look for a husband. Just like stop. They're like, decenter men. Figure
Just
out. I'm like,
decenter men.
wow, what would have happened if someone had been
Four
telling
Bs.
me that was the point of life in my 20s? What a world.
Absolutely. Expectations are premeditated resentments. That's a 12-step thing. I love it so much. But if you are dating someone or want to marry someone and you have an expectation that they will improve, no.
No.
They're an
It's a
adult.
setup.
I mean, unless
It's
you're
a
dating a
setup.
child, which is illegal. So it's either of those things. The person you were with, just trust that this is who they are. When people show you who they are, believe them. Yeah.
And so another way that I think that we get groomed is what's happening right now in our culture, which is we go to our traditional. Well, I was just thinking, Paula, like how many, like we're talking about the Gen Zers and we're like, you go girl. Yes. Like, don't buy it. Good. But how many older women, other than your wonderful mother,
R.I.P.
told you like it's a scam, said like, good for you. Like, or how many therapists, supervisors gave you the message of like, nah, girl, like cut and run.
Save yourself. Get out.
Save yourself. This system is not none. Right?
None.
Because you go. So part of the grooming is you're trained into, well, I have to do the turkey and I have to do the presents. And if you don't, your mother-in-law and your mother and your sister and your sister-in-law and all the other perfect women are looking at you like, oh, what is she, too good for this? Like she's the lazy one. Like you become one of the lazy guys. But for you, for a woman, it's not okay.
No,
It's
never.
fine for all the guys to sit around and watch football. But if I'm
Right.
like, I don't want to do this stupid stuff, I'm going to watch football. It's like, that's socially not okay.
Right.
And that's another, it's a huge, if you think about the social cost of being like, I'm going to be the woman that doesn't really pitch in because I think this is all kind of dumb. And I don't know, can we just order DoorDash? Like, you're a pariah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah. I mean, I think about that in terms of like, this is the first house that my partner and I have ever lived in. I am not great at keeping house. It's not, my mom wasn't good at it. I'm not that good at it. My mom didn't teach me to be good at it. But it's still interesting that when people come over, the pressure I feel, because if the house is a mess, my partner, who is a biological male, is not going to get the brunt of the judgment. Not that anybody's even going to judge me, but that programming is in there so deep. It's so wild. Even though I had a mom that, like, my mom literally only cleaned the house once a week. If it wasn't Friday, she wasn't fucking cleaning it. Which I think is amazing. But like, it's still in my brain. It's still in there. It's wild.
My mom told me she used to think she would go to jail if
Oh,
our
you've
house
said
wasn't
that
clean.
before. That is
She
so
used to
wild.
I mean, she may still believe this, but she genuinely thought, like, if this house isn't clean, like, someone will come get me, right? And so the motherhood, the double of that on motherhood, because if the kids
my
aren't acting
God.
right, if the kids aren't raised right, guess what? Nobody's looking at dad.
Nope.
Nobody has the trope. It's another, like, grooming trope of, like, well, you
Everything.
go to therapy because your mom, you know, what your mom did to you. Like, it's the pressure of all of that makes it very hard for women to be like, I'm not doing this. And when you do, you
Totally.
risk, I mean, I've been doing it, and you have to really be able to tolerate a lot of social ostracization and, like,
And
side eye,
discomfort.
and
Yeah.
it's not fun.
No.
And the older generation, at least for us, they're not, like, they're not helpful.
No, the boomers are not going to help us stop overfunctioning. The boomers are, that's like your friend at the bar saying you should stop drinking. Like, the overfunctioners boomer women are not going to be the ones to say it. No.
No.
Yeah. I think about that all the time and we talked about this in our couples session one, but like the amount of things that women, and I'm so grateful that it feels like it's finally turning around. But the amount of responsibilities that women have has just increased every decade. And now we're CEOs and all these things, which is so great. But like nothing has been taken off of our plate. Nothing in about 100 years.
No.
Nothing.
It gets harder and more complicated.
Yeah.
And what I think is like, I used to assume, oh, these things. I remember when I lived in Benin in West Africa, and I would say, why don't the girls go to school? Because they wouldn't go to school as much. Or why are the girls always in the kitchen, right? And everybody'd say, oh, they don't like school. Oh, they like being in the kitchen, right? There's this, like, that's what they like. And I was always sort of like, that seems awry. Like, I don't, but that's, and I now think about it, and like, when I'm being Santa Claus, that's not a fun job. I always assumed it was fun. Like, oh, they like this. It's a freaking ton of work. It is
That seems like a lot of
exhausting.
work.
It is stressful.
Oh.
It's like a massive mental load. And not to mention, like, if it's financially hard or whatever, it's like
Yeah.
these things that we're like, oh, they like this. Oh, the women love chit-chattering in the kitchen. Have you ever asked one? Like, do you like
Have you
this?
ever asked
Is this
that?
something, what is this like for you to do? And
Yeah.
really listen to the answer. Because I think part of what happens is we don't ask women that, and women are never allowed to think about it. They are never encouraged to think about, what is
No.
this experience like for me? And the answer 9 times out of 10 would be, it is stressful, it is painful, it is exhausting. Like,
Right.
it's not fun, a lot of it.
No. And like we said before, it will kill you if you keep doing it. And so we want to make sure this is not a gendered discussion, even though it seeming like it. If men do it too, right? And people of no genders do it, or both genders, or all the genders, and genderqueer people do it as well. So let's be clear about the fact that the original definition is the hyperfixation on everybody's experience around you, and the hyperfixation on the idea that you have any power. And that's the thing too, is like what I say to clients a lot who probably have narcissistic overfunctioning parents is, I'm so sorry that you were brainwashed to believe that you have any power over anybody's experience. That like kids are not supposed to be taught that they should be obsessed with how other people feel around them. You were the least powerful person in the room when you got brainwashed to believe that you should be obsessed with how everybody else is doing. And now you are still carrying that. It's still your responsibility. And it's just not. And now, whatever sense of empathy that you had, that you were born with, which is how it usually starts, has now been perverted into, like, it's now taken over. Like, now the call is coming from inside the house. We have to learn how to do less.
And I am learning that. So, like, I've been listening to a lot of podcast doing a lot of like parenting training around the specific type of autism, which may be what's happening with my kids. And the mantra, what is so interesting is that the more you do, the more you pressure, the more you try to teach these kids, the less functional they become. The whole idea is do less.
Yes.
And what that has made me, and it's true. So I've started like reducing the expectations. I look and that everybody in the house is happier. And what they talk about with this parenting modality is it is a lie. It is a myth that anybody can control anyone else. The parenting industrial complex wants mothers to believe you can control the outcome of your child and that is your response. And it is not true. Like, do we have to like boundary them and keep them safe? Sure. Like, I'm not, do we need to feed them? Yes. But this idea that like, I think that so much over functioning and not great parenting comes from this idea of like, and I know I did bad parenting when it was like, well, I have to get you to eat well. Like that is, if you don't, that's going to be on me. It's going to, and it's like, it's not. You are a sentient being. I can offer you healthy food, but I can't, like, you're a being that gets to make your own choices ultimately.
And you have your own body separate from my body.
Yeah.
So
like I can't make you like really realizing I can't make my children do anything.
Yes.
And that I am not responsible for the outcome. Like that has made our household so much. And I believe that if couples would do this with each other, just be like, I have no control over you.
Yes.
Everyone would just calm down.
You cannot love something and control it at the same time. You can only do one of those things. That's true of your body. That's true of your partner. It's fucking true of yourself. You cannot love something and try to constrain it at the same time. Those are opposite vibrations.
And what is the main thing in every parenting book is how do I make him? How do I get him to? How do I, like that is the parenting industrial complex is basically a myriad of coercive manipulations about how do I get a kid to behave in X
a way that
if you
makes
really
me
look
feel
at
good.
it, that is what 90% of parenting literature, if you look at it as in like you look for manipulation and coercion, it's all dressed up.
Yes.
Manipulation and coercion. And then I sit with couples and I'm like, wow, how weird. Your entire marriage is basically, they're asking me, can you help me get this person? How do you help me get this person to do what I want?
And a lot of times
constantly I'm just like, that's not what a relationship is. We're not doing that.
Well, and a lot of times it's the woman being brainwashed to ask you for help with that, and then the man is coming to you to ask you to get her off his back, right? And so that means this is where we get to after years of her over functioning and him under functioning, right? So. And then we're at the bottom of the barrel, right? And then we're like, how do we climb back the fuck out and remember that we are two separate beings and that love and freedom are the same vibration. So the more I love you, the more freedom I give you, right? If you love someone, you give them space. That is the truth. So then how do we work our way out from that point?
Are we answering that?
I don't know. Do you want to start answering that?
I mean, I know how I'm starting to do it.
Okay.
And what's interesting is I constantly think I'm going to get called up in front of a licensing board because I feel like I'm breaking all the couples therapy rules, which I think is very interesting. But
good.
What I am really working on is we have to just tell the truth.
Yes.
And we have to leave. I constantly say in couples therapy now, I'm like, you want me to give you I just say what's happening. Yeah. You're asking me to give you a woman who will be happy with you, despite the fact that she's doing 90% of all the labor while holding down a job, possibly as the breadwinner. Right. And you want me to get her to be in a good mood while giving you a lot of loving energy. Right. That's what is that? And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, okay, that's a fantasy. Yes. That's not a thing I'm even going to ask. And I think a lot of couples therapists are like, yeah, I'm going to roll up my sleeves and that's what I'm going to try to give you. And I finally realized, I was like, that's nonsense.
It is nonsense.
Right? Like, we have to just tell the truth. And I'll say to the guy, like, I can't give you that.
No.
That's not realistic. And she's sitting here telling you she's tapped out. So here's the thing. You can maybe keep a wife who will keep doing the 90% of the stuff, but you're probably not going to have a great sex life, and she might not be very nice to you, and you might just exist as roommates. Because she's saying that's her capacity, right? We don't lie about our capacity.
Yeah.
And a lot of the times, I feel like the guy will choose the roommate.
Yes.
He's like, yeah, I'm fine with it's very interesting. They're not
Yeah.
like, oh, I'll say if you want to do 50% of the stuff, I think you might get a more loving connect, right? Like I'm
Yeah.
kind of, and they're like they'll think about it. I'm like, okay, interesting.
You don't want to do all this stuff.
But at least now we're living in
truth.
reality. I am
Right.
so tired of saying to women, like, well, maybe if you ask differently, maybe if you ask better.
If you're
I'm like,
more
can we just
vulnerable, that's the bullshit that couples
can we
therapy-
just label reality? Like, that's my new thing.
Well, I love that because it going back to what we just said about Thanksgiving, right? About like we can make different choices when we're fucking honest with ourselves. So to me, that's just being honest about like, okay, the idea that you were given about what marriage is a fucking scam, and none of it's real, and it's never been real, and it was all created by the marriage industrial complex so that people would everybody would need a washer and dryer. That's all it's about. It's not about love. It's never been about love. It's about rich white men being richer. That's all it's about. Then when we're honest about that, and then when we're honest about the fact that like, like the memes I love that are like, oh, make America great again, going back to how great it was when all the women had to be on Valium because they were so miserable because they were trapped in a house. And this is what Cyndi Lauper talked about, taking it full circle back to Cyndi Lauper. This is, the Cyndi Lauper concert. She talks about this, that like she's Italian. She grew up in the Bronx. She grew up with all these women who were like trapped in their homes. And it made
They were all committing suicide.
She was
The
so
suicide
young.
rates were bonkers.
Because of course they were. Because can you imagine?
No.
These poor women couldn't do anything. They were literally slaves, emotional slaves to their husbands. They had to cook all the time. They had to have a billion children. All this stuff about how, oh, it's so sad that no marriages don't last 70 years anymore. Your grandmother couldn't buy a house. It's all a scam. And so the more honest we are about like we were fed a scam, right? And now here you are, and both of you are miserable. Turns out your mother was too, and your grandmother, and probably all of them. And now let's just tell the truth about what this is.
Let's just tell. And I actually just had this thought of, if we think about, we know that the suicide rates go up when women cannot get a divorce, and when women were, didn't have financial freedom.
Have to be mothers. Yeah.
And we now, so that's rage. That's rage turned inward is
Totally.
suicide, right?
Yep.
Because what I said, I wrote my mother a letter and I said, I don't know how you didn't murder them in their sleep. Now that I've raised children with a man who is there and I'm literally, it's still really hard.
Yes.
And I was like, because she raised us alone. And I'm like, I don't know how you did not. And so the murder, right, would be the rage outward, but that's going to get you a very big consequence and thrown in jail. You're actually probably better off dead or in an asylum. Like a lot of them ended up in asylum, right?
Yeah.
And then we wonder, why do we have all these depressed women who never get mad, who never have a sense of, oh, I'm doing too much? Because that's the ancestral training, is you have to turn it on yourself.
Yes.
You have to get mad at yourself for not being able to handle it,
Right.
rather than being like, you are not doing what
something
what
wrong
you
with
need
you.
to do. I'm doing too much and I'm sitting down.
And I'm going on vacation. Yeah.
I'm sitting down.
Totally. Yes. So I just wanted to lay out, because you know that I take all of like psychology stuff and then it goes in my brain and it fiddles around a little bit, and then I have to come up with a spiritual component to it, because that's the way it translates in my weird Aquarius brain. And I was listening to this lecture by my teacher, Ram Dass, and the way he said it so resonated with me. So he was talking about how the way it gets so charged when there is opposite gender marriages, and we're doing, because number one, we're doing the thing that we saw our mother do, like ancestrally for women. Ancestrally, there's like this, like all these women who had to do it and were miserable or whatever. And for the men, there's ancestrally all these men who were also probably miserable, and maybe they wanted to garden or change a diaper and they couldn't because they had to go work at some job and pretend like their job was real, even though none of those jobs are real, right? And so what Ron Dass said that I love. He said, the problem is that when you have somebody in your home environment, and who has powerful symbolic value. And the way he talks about it is like, this is the man and the man is doing the thing, and this is the woman and the woman is doing the thing. And so when we get so caught up in these symbolic roles that have such charged vibrations to them, and especially if you are a married person and your mother was a married person and blah, 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 it's like, it's so, and to dance with all of the symbology of that and all of the symbolism of that and all of the like roles and all of the, I'm doing the same thing that my mom did, and she married a man and she was miserable and she hated him, and why did I do that? And then the husband is like, I'm married to a woman who hates me and she doesn't love me enough and she won't let me fuck her every night, and that might have happened, right? And there's just so much. It's just really intense. And so I have to think about it in that way so that I can like give it a lot of space and think about it from the sense of like the humanity of it all, right? And that we're all just doing the best we can with these ideas that this is what we were supposed to do and we were all supposed to do it this way. And I don't know if that's helpful for anybody else, but that really helps me think about it in terms of the roles and in terms of the gender dynamics of all of it. And it blows up the like, I'm doing it wrong, he's doing it wrong, we're doing it wrong stuff.
Well, because it comes back to the name of the podcast, right? Because both feel like,
right,
I'm doing it wrong, right? I'm not attractive. Somehow I'm supposed to, this fantasy, right? I'm supposed to be able to get this woman to want to have sex with me by doing literally nothing, exhausting her, laying on the couch. Like, that's what my dad did, and he was, and I don't know, this is weird. I must be doing it wrong, right? So then we get reinvested in, and I feel like part of what I do now as a couples therapist is be like, if that's a fantasy, if that's a lie, what do you each actually want?
Yes.
And can you give it? I mean, I work with agreements, and like, are you available
agreements are so
to
important.
actually directly communicate? And can we just talk about, I can give that to you right now. I can give that to you never. I can give that to you maybe in the future, but I don't know. And if I can, it's going to depend on if you do. Like, people don't know how to have grown-up conversations, I think, because of what you're talking about, where we live in this fantasy and just go around huffing and puffing and everybody's mad. And I'm like, we have to just directly communicate about, again, we're not lying about what we're capable of. Are you in a place where I can expect to have sex in the next year? Guess what? No. We have a child who's 1 and 3. Bedtime is a nightmare. I am exhausted. I think the odds are low for you. Well, good. Well, now it's out there. And I can say, like,
my
you know what? It's
ovaries
not
are shutting
personal.
down and my body feels terrible. So now,
No, and it might be because you're making me put the kids to bed, and and I hate you for it. Or it could also be like, you're helping me and you're doing your part, and I still don't have it in me. But at least we can stop, because the men are watching that sitcom too. Like, the men are watching and they're going, well, I guess I just nag and make fun of her and sit and do nothing, and this is the best it gets.
Yeah.
And I feel like we have to introduce the idea of, like, you don't have to buy in to this nonsense package that we were all sold. And I mean, a lot of people like the package, and, the women will leave or what, different. But getting people to reality is like super hard and super helpful. But I think we're all taught to like lie to each other.
Right. And I think it's best, in terms of the overfunctioning, like, to recognize when I also want to say, yes, I think we have been lying to each other, and I think we haven't been telling the truth, and we just need to tell the truth. I think I want to say just real quick too, with the overfunctioning, like, we're not saying never overfunction, or we're not saying overfunctioning is bad. We're not saying any of that. Like, when my mom got sick, I overfunctioned the fuck out of all of it. And it was my favorite thing to do. It was my drug of choice, right? But it's like, when am I doing it? When I know that I'm doing it, and recognizing when I'm in that space and in that, I get in that super overfunctional, exhausted, resentment place. It's so yuck. It's so yuck. And I have to just be aware that it's happening. And in those moments, to your point, telling the truth. I'm overwhelmed. I'm in this space. I'm feeling like I did a million things and that you didn't do anything. The overfunctioning always leads to resentment. So just knowing when you're there.
And I think one of the things that helped me the most, because I too am a chronic overfunctioner, is I find something happened where I finally didn't see myself as a victim of the
Yes.
overfunctioning.
Right.
And I think this is the piece,
the choice part.
we were going to get to with the love and control are opposites, where
Yes.
it didn't become like you're doing something to me that's making me overfunction. Like you're not doing this, so now I have to do this.
Right.
It finally got to a point where it was like, I set my own limits,
Yes.
irrespective of you. And like, if I end up doing more of the childcare, or I end up like, I'm then not going to beat myself up if I can't make a perfect dinner, or if I like,
Right.
and those expectations, that programming, that's on me.
Yeah.
I have the choice. I was
Yes.
doing it to myself.
Yeah.
And I think there's an extra layer that it's hard if you have like, a mother-in-law or somebody who you have to also fight through. I didn't have to fight through a lot of the judgment from other people, but like,
Right.
But realizing even that, it's like me caring about what you think, that's on me.
Yeah.
I'm not a victim. And once I got real clear about that and my overfunctioning,
Not
kind of
a
like yours,
victim.
like I can choose to do it or not.
Yeah.
But I now know like it's on me, and I'm not mad at everybody anymore. I'm not
Right.
resentful. There's no vibe, because it's between me and me.
And I'm right. If I'm going to
And-
choose to do all of these things, this is my choice. Nobody's making me do this. No one's making me do
Nobody,
this.
because I don't have to compensate for I don't compensate for anyone else anymore.
Good.
And I don't do things I don't want to do. And if I do, I acknowledge like, oh, I'm doing that because I don't really want to have that fight or whatever. And that's, that's on me, and I can make that choice.
Yeah.
But man, you don't have to get mad and resentful anymore.
If you're
amazing.
honest. Yeah.
Yeah.
Another thing that helped me a lot was I had a teacher say, like, and this is what I say to couples a lot, like, this is not loving. It is not loving. And one of the things she said that I thought was so brilliant was like, it's so not loving to do things for a grown fucking adult who is capable of doing it. That is not loving. You are not behaving and speaking to the highest vibration of that other person. You are actually behaving and speaking to the lowest vibration of that other person, the part of you that believes that grown adult can't take care of their own shit. And that is not love. That's actually really mean.
Right.
And once
If that's the energy.
if that's the energy, right? If the energy is that I'm doing something that this person can do for themselves. And that's the trusting part. And that's a lot of, we get groomed to overfunction because we can't trust that things will get done, or that we can trust the other person to do the thing. And the only way we learn to trust is by trusting. But like to let it go, like you're talking about, and like I'm not overcompensating for anybody else, and I'm not doing something for somebody that they can do for themselves. And even if I think it should be done and they're not doing it, that's none of my fucking business. It's none
Or even
of
just
my
being
business.
honest with yourself about if you are going to lean into what I call kind of that martyr energy, or
Totally.
of at least having a conversation with yourself about, because I think often there's also a shadow side of I'm doing this for you so that you will be who I need you to be. It really is
Totally.
actually a selfish, and
Yes.
having a little interrogation moment of like,
Totally.
why am I
Right.
am I doing this because I'm scared of you? Because we didn't talk about the fact that in some dynamics, I mean, men can get violent and very scary.
Yeah,
and,
of
there's
course.
so we don't want to pretend, but we're talking about kind of situations where that's not the case. But it can go a long way just to observe, like, where is this coming from? And I'm going to I might keep doing it, but I'm going to just be honest with myself
Yeah.
about I'm over my limit right now, and I'm doing this, and I'm probably going to resent this person for doing it, and I still can't stop even that. It's like
Right.
have a little moment of honest observation about your own motivation.
Yeah. And also, you can ask for one thing that I learned relatively recently is like, if I do something and I want acknowledgement for it, God damn it, I can just ask for that. Right? Like, I did the dishes and you didn't ask, and my partner and I do this for each other now. And, if he does something and I don't think it's a big deal, but I will give him that anyway. you know, and like, because we all need that. We all need the like, thank you for doing the thing that I didn't ask you. Thank you. Right. And like,
Yeah.
that is loving. The loving control or opposites piece, like another lesson I learned from this teacher I'm talking about is she said that, you know, to love somebody is to retire completely from coercion and recruitment. And it's so good. Like we retire completely from coercion and recruitment. I'm not recruiting anybody. I'm not coercing anybody. I'm not convincing anybody. Right. And that's hard, especially
It's hard because
when we've been taught that that's what love is to recruit and convince and coerce, but it's not. It's not.
well, and we might have to deal with guilt or with grief, right? If we learn like, oh,
Yeah.
I'm not right. Like part of my overfunctioning journey was realizing like, oh, a lot of my relationships, even friendships, are kind of one-sided. Like I'm doing all the work.
Yeah.
So, and it wasn't angry, but I was just like, I'm gonna kind of scale this back and back. And then sometimes we have grief where it's like, oh, they're not
Totally.
okay. This is now not a relationship. That's sad.
Right.
You know, it's like we meet reality when we give up the coercion and the I will make you. But
Right.
that is a painful, scary thing. It's
Well,
hard.
especially in a culture where we don't have any foundation in our culture or context for dealing with grief, but we do have a lot of context and foundation for dealing with control. So if we give ourselves room to just feel grief around, this is not the relationship I thought it was, I can grieve that and then I can move on. And now I have so much more energy now that I'm not trying to get this person to be somebody that they obviously don't want to fucking be. But when we don't have space for that in our culture, and we have such weird things, like we've talked about, that like if you're friends with someone, you should be friends with them for your whole goddamn life. Or if you love someone, you should be married to them for your whole goddamn life. We have all sorts of weird shit like that.
Well, and what if actually, I'm going to add a definition of overfunctioning. What if overfunctioning is all that we do in order to avoid feeling grief?
Totally.
Because I think that's a lot of what I see is like, I will work really hard to not face the reality
that this
of
person,
what this relationship is. That especially with women in like kind of patriarchal relationships, it's like if you keep over functioning, there's a lot you don't have to face about
Totally.
how not loved or not empathized with or even how exploited you're being. And I can see why you might not want to look that in the eye. You know,
Sure.
that's a hard, but I think in some ways with overfunctioning, we're just outrunning grief. That's a definition I
trying
would add
to.
to the list.
I mean, we're trying to, but it doesn't. It catches up eventually. And also, can I just add a little bit of hope that, like, when I have, in the ways in which I have retired from overfunctioning, it's so much better because it's painful at first to be like, oh, this is not what I thought it was, or you're not who I thought you were going to be, or whatever. But also, I have so much more energy to create whatever I want to create or lay down. Which is
And
so
the
nice.
relationships,
Have you tried
well, I
laying
will
down?
say, yeah, like you have to get through the grief. I think
Yeah.
there's fear of like, oh God, what if this is a relationship that is now dead because I've been deluding myself and doing all the work.
Totally.
But on the other side of that, you find the relationships that actually are mutual. And they
Right.
feel so much better because you don't.
Yes.
Nobody's mad and indirect and vibing. It's like, so that's the other thing on the other side that I think it's like
Yes.
sometimes it goes well, and sometimes even if you were over functioning, the underfunctioner will come up and meet you when you give them a little bit of room. Like just
And they can do it on their own timetable and not, yeah.
yeah. But it's a gamble. It's a hard gamble because we
It
don't
is a
know
gamble.
what they're gonna do.
If you identify with overfunctioning in any way, I think the main thing is try doing less, see how it feels. I am convinced that if women, again, this is not gendered, but if overfunctioning and specifically overfunctioning people who are socialized female can tolerate the first 10 minutes of doing less, they can take over the world. They'll be just fine. So
Grief, guilt. So this is what I would say. Guilt. You're gonna
Mm-hmm.
feel guilt if you're a woman and you sit down on the couch and you binge watch What the Fuck is Wrong with Kevin or whatever.
Yeah.
You're gonna feel guilt. Guilt has never killed anyone.
right.
Okay. You can ancestrally you cannot escape it.
Right.
What is the saying in AA? It's like if you have to choose between guilt and resentment, always choose the guilt. if
that
you
a
want to
thing?
stay sober, yes. Because if
Oh,
you think about it,
resentment is the killer.
resentment is the overfunctioning, right?
Yes.
So if I'm going to be, I have to do this, you're making me do, right? You're going to overfunction and you're
Well,
going to
I
drink.
guess I'll have to do it myself. Yeah.
But if you can learn to tolerate the guilt, which means I am honoring my limits and I am being authentic to who I am,
yes.
you will stay sober. And if someone can stay sober while feeling guilty, it will not kill you.
You'll be fine. You'll be fine.
That's
Also,
my
once you
favorite
start
AA
laying
saying.
down, I love that one. I didn't know that one. And once you start laying down more,
You can't stop.
it's so great. It's so great. Or once you start like, I could just read this book, or maybe I can just do this. The other thing is like, if you are caught in an overfunctioner, underfunctioner cycle with your partner or a family member, if you start if you are the overfunctioner and you start behaving more like them, first of all, you understand why they're laying down all the time because it's great. Second of all, you don't resent them as much, and you're like, oh, I get it. This whole sitting on the couch smoking weed, playing video games thing, it's not that bad. It's kind of great, right? And as long as no one will die, you'll be fine.
It's just a little, and what I said to someone this morning who I thought was not quite ready to, was like, maybe even just observe and acknowledge to yourself, I'm tired and I'm now over my limit. You can keep over functioning, but even just establishing a little internal dialogue about, this is my limit. I'm over it. That can be a good first step. You can just notice. Just notice, oh, there it is. I don't want to be doing stuff anymore. Going to keep doing it, but I know that I don't want to do it.
Yes. Great. If you have any questions or thoughts or feelings about overfunctioning, underfunctioning, being in the world, we would love to hear about it. Leave us an iTunes review. That would be awesome. If you want to follow us, I'm at Paula D. Atkinson on all the things, I think, and you're at Lisa K's.
The Lisa K's.
Yeah. And if you have a suggestion for something you are curious about in the world of therapy and functioning and relationality, let us know. And we'll talk to you next time. I hope everybody's doing well. Bye, guys.
Bye. This podcast and any written materials related to it represent the opinions of Paula Atkinson and Lisa K, and our guests to the show and any written materials. The content here should not be taken as medical advice. It is for informational and educational purposes only, and because each person is so unique, please consult your healthcare professional for any medical questions. In no way does listening, reading, emailing, or interacting on social media with our content establish a doctor-patient relationship.